with organizations like this and Coke and Pepsi, and it's around how do we occupy the middle. We've talked about the elephant in the room, and I think that the environmental movement has allowed itself to get pigeonholed in terms of being inaccessible, somewhat elitist, and overly strident. And so what I love about the Nature Conservancy and what we do and what I love to do is find that middle ground that can cross the divide. So being on the other side, there are frustrations, but what I get excited about and hopeful about is the power of the for-profit sector to weigh in, be it on the communication side, on the audience side, or bringing just their sheer brand muscle.
And I was interested, again, in the way you look at the structure of the running of the Nature Conservancy. Like, you make a very concerted effort, both regionally and nationally, to have a balance of politics and opinion, right?
Right. So we're in 70 countries. We're in every state. We operate right here in Idaho. And our governance structure, we have one legal entity, one global board. But in each of our business units, we have 85 of them. Every one of them has a board, an advisory board. And in the US, those trustees, we call those board members trustees, they're 50% Republican, they're 50% Democrat, and we work at that. So again, our path forward, our solution to a lot of these issues is bipartisanship, standing up for your values, there's no question about that. But I think there's not enough listening, and when Renee talked about communications and empathy and the psychology of all this, we're working very hard to find language that people can really understand.
Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm staying on time. I think I'm roughly. Do you see the same behaviour of politics, or a bit like we heard about the town behaviour here in terms of running the town, where people of different politics come together and just get the job done? Is that kind of how it works within those governing boards, or are they sort of led by political bipartisanship?
Yeah, no. Our take on our boards is that, and it's an adage from the 80s, right? Think global, act local. So the power of our brand and our business is the local empowerment of the boards. The boards don't tend to be political, they tend to be pragmatic, and they reflect their communities. So quite frankly, the perspective of the Nature Conservancy in Pennsylvania on fracking is very different than the perspective of the Nature Conservancy in New York on fracking. So we grapple with these issues all the time.
And are you, as I asked Julie at the beginning, are you seeing any different interests from commercial or corporates in terms of partnerships with you over the last year, or is it because you've got this sort of balance, is it pretty much business as usual?
No, we've seen demand, and quite frankly, I look at this in a greater narrative. People forget that CVS came out years ago and stopped smoking, right? People did not appreciate that Facebook 2 weeks ago came out and changed their mission to be more focused on, half of Facebook's audience are groups. And Facebook has gone from passive, they're moving on a continuum from passive, this is our platform, to active. How do we work harder to enable people to use the platform for good? Salesforce, when Carolina and other states passed anti-LGBT laws, the chairman of Facebook went out to his employees and said, I will move you for free out of a state that you don't want to work in. So again, climate is the issue of the day, but I look back at the broader trend. Corporations are leaning into these issues. They have a huge ability to impact these issues, and I'm hopeful. So I think there's always some skepticism about greenwashing, et cetera, but the people that are running these corporations are the people like us, and the next generation of leaders are people like your kids. So I'm very hopeful that in the future, we won't be talking about purpose-driven companies versus not, right? Companies will build purpose and value into the brand platform and the very essence of what they do.
And 3 questions which we'll all answer, each of you kind of answer together, just to finish off. Roll forward 12 months, and we're sitting here, hopefully, if we get invited back by Amy. We're sitting here in 12 months. What personally would you be proud of to be sharing as a milestone for you in the next 12 months? Let's start with who looks ready to answer it the most. Julie. Ladies first.
I would say, because I just recently was in Paris and pitching this campaign for BNP to launch globally on purpose investing, I hope that they will vote to adopt this, and this is what I'm going to be talking about next year.
When will you know?
In 2 weeks.
Wow, will you share it with us?
Yes.
Brilliant. Howard.
Yeah, I think as we're transforming the brand talk about a campaign or a platform that we've launched that's really tied to the value that we provide. This idea of either retraining a workforce or being involved with the right sort of financial sustainability, and really showing how this legacy brand can be a part of the movement. I'd like to be able to come back and show a case on that.
Maybe we could do that together as a shameless business plug for FairShare. Geof.
Yeah, I have two goals. One is there's tremendous inefficiency across all these nonprofit spaces. There are 1.3 million nonprofits in the US. There are 20,000 plus environmental groups. So my personal aspiration would be, and I wanted to talk to Amy about this a little bit, is we need greater alignment. We need greater consolidation of strategies. The strategies are too disparate. So I would love a year from now to be able to say the movement has made progress in that. And then the other thing that I've seen post-election is the proliferation of millennials creating their own environmental groups and their own charities and their own nonprofits. And a year from now, I would like to think that the larger organizations have figured out how to embrace that energy, and the smaller organizations have figured out how to partner with the larger ones.
So in the same way that corporations compete, so do not-for-profits, right? There's 30-something water charities. Now, when we've talked about this, is it naive to say that the future is about collaboration, or is it just human nature that these different... Because I feel like there's wastage in the system where too many charities that could work more closely together, as could business, could find much more efficiency in the system. But I feel like I'm being naive.
Well, I think you are. And I have to say, because I started in the nonprofit side, and I was increasingly frustrated, and that's what drove me to the for-profit side. I saw a tremendous amount of inefficiency in philanthropy, not a great attempt or willingness to collaborate, because I think human nature is ego-driven, and it's a problem.
You know,
We're allowed to be naive because we're only 4 months old, you see, so we can say things like that. In a year, it'd look stupid, wouldn't it? Probably.
you know,
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just to build on that point and to what Geof said before, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of energy that corporations and brands have in the world and that they put out in the world. And they're all, as we heard earlier from, the content marketing experts, having meaning and having purpose is a really, really big, important thing for brands. But what's key is that brands aren't out in the world just looking for random things to connect to. They're looking for things that connect to their value proposition in the world. So I was on a panel with the CMO of Patagonia in Montreal a couple of weeks ago, and we were actually talking about this topic. And one of the things that he said is, it's a no-brainer for us. If the world gets warmer, we go out of business. So of course, that's part of our value proposition. We want to align ourselves with sustainability, we want to fight climate change, et cetera. At MetLife, we're going to focus more on things that are core to our values. How do we help the workforce? How do we help bring people back into the workforce? So the thing that you need to do is remember that big brands are looking for this, but know that they don't know the landscape. This stat about how many different groups or nonprofits are created every year makes it mind-boggling for those of us that work in brands. Find the brands that you think your mission will help. Think about what their company does. If you can help them, go talk to them about what the relationship might be, because the scale of effort and force is dramatically different. And if you can align yourself in the right way with a brand, there's a connection there that will help both of you. And I just don't think that happens enough.
I think that's a great point. Sorry, Geof, go ahead.
Yeah, and just one last thought from me. Donors play a tremendous role. Philanthropists play a tremendous role, or can, in forcing that alignment. So about 2 years ago, EDF and TNC were grantees of $15 million from MacArthur Foundation. So MacArthur Foundation said, you two are very strong on climate. You need to figure out how to work together. Here's some money to make that happen. So don't underestimate the power of donors and philanthropists to force more alignment within this space.
And I think, Amy, you did a great job this morning of translating for some of us in the room that were trying to understand some of the language of the world that some of these companies in the room speak. I think the importance of learning each other's language is really important. Geof, Howard, Julie, thank you so much for your time. I hope you've seen a different perspective.